And so again, welcome to the PG effort. You can see the agenda there. We'll have a welcome. This is the welcome right now. Adriana and Jerry will be talking about kind of the updates with the preservation group. We'll have a session on Jacob Calvert is going to be talking from MnDOT. We'll be talking about the cold recycling that's been done on 70th Street and some of the findings from that. And then we'll follow up with a discussion on the PG study future. I have a few slides put together on some decisions that we need to make going into the future and how we want to go about that, because we are going to be extending the contract with NCAT for 18 months, roughly 2 years, to kind of finish up some of the tasks that we're working on, which is a great opportunity with the performance we're seeing and the products we're developing to kind of customize those products to your needs. So we'll get into that in the wrap up. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Adriana. You can share your presentation. I'll stop sharing mine, and we'll go from there. So Adriana, please take it from here.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to have so many people joining. Hopefully, we'll get back to our in-person meetings at some point soon. So today, we'll go over some of the PG study update. And I know a lot of you probably came to the Test Track conference or joined online. So I won't make this too much about the condition update, but more on the efforts update. But just for reference and for those who need a refresher where we are right now, we are 9 years into the study since we started with the very first sections in 2012. And we have 145 test sections that we continuously monitor and analyze. So it's definitely a big effort. Many of those sections are still in either good or fair condition. So that means there's a lot more room to look into them, to get more information, to get to the point where we're able to really quantify those benefits of pavement preservation. So again, just as a reminder of where we are, and maybe I'll just explain what this chart is about, but we have our 5 different test locations. We have 2 in Alabama, which are the top ones, Lee Road 159 and US 280, which will be what we consider a warm weather section. So you see the happy sunny face in there. We have them at varying levels of traffic. So Lee Road is low traffic, and then US 280, the high traffic section. And then we have 3 different sites for the cold weather sections in Minnesota. So we have CASA 8 with the low traffic, US 169 with the high traffic, and then 70th Street, which is the one that we most recently built. And the level of traffic, the ESOLs that it receives is pretty comparable to what we have considered as our high traffic sections. You can see there the length of time that they have been in service, and this is just to give us a relative comparison of where they are right now, and you'll see it in the following charts as well. But this is a good summary of all the things we have, all the things that we've been looking at, and considering as variables that may be important to how this different treatments perform. Something that we get asked a lot, have we done anything to these sections since construction? Most of them we haven't even touched since they were built. We had a repair in 2018 for one of the sections on Lee Road 159. It was actually a half a section. So we had a treatment that just a combination of events, basically the drainage issues and being close to the intersection with the heavy traffic and all of that. We had a slippage, and we had to repair, basically replace that half section. And then last year we had to also do some work on some of the control sections in US 169. But other than that, we really haven't done anything. So that's important and speaks a lot as to how all of these treatments are performing, even for those that are 9 years old. Again, I feel like that's very significant. Now, as far as where we are in terms of our performance indicators, I wanted to also show like what percentage of sections are either in good, fair, or poor condition category. I kept the bars at the same length as the time that they've been in service, just to give you an idea, because maybe we'll see, for example, a lot of red in that top bar for Leroy 159, but it's also the longest bar, meaning that it's been in place for 9 years. So again, that gives us an idea of, okay, this is how the treatments are performing so far. So one thing that I would like to point out here, for example, on Leroy 159, we still have that 4%, which I think is like one section that is in good condition category. And then roughly half of them are in fair condition category in terms of cracking, meaning 5 to 20% cracking. And we've had some that have gone over the threshold, more than 20% cracking. But again, 9 years. So this is the status right now. The US 280 sections, we do have some that have gone over 20% cracking, roughly 41% still in good condition, about half in fair condition category. The CASA 8 sections, again, it seems to be about the same story. The US 169, even though they've been about this, they have been in service for the same time as the CASA 8 sections. We can see a lot of more sections transitioning into that fair condition category, and then even some more with more cracking than 20%. We haven't had anything too significant for cracking for 70th Street, but those are the newer sections. Still, most of them in good condition category in terms of cracking. And one thing that I wanted to point out is the type of cracking that we see. So maybe we see the red in those bars and think, oh, that's not good. But really what we're seeing is this type of cracking from these pictures. So in the south, we have cracks along the wheel paths, longitudinal cracking. So it's basically low severity fatigue cracking, and it's coming from what was already there, the condition of the pavement at the time of treatment. It's present, but I wouldn't think it's too severe. The cracks, for the most part, are pretty tight. They just reflected back to the surface, and I think the treatments are still doing a good job at keeping that surface sealed. In the north, what we see is those thermal cracks. We still count them as part of the cracked area, so there may be some differences there in how we match the MAP 21 criteria and our criteria. We just use the 20% threshold to have something in there. So maybe we're being a little more severe, um, more conservative than what the MAP 21 criteria is. But again, in the north, this is what's there already. The treatments have done a good job at making the cracks a little less severe, but definitely those aggressive thermal cracks, I think it's hard to stop them with just preservation. So it's something to keep in mind when we just see the numbers, to go back and remember what those cracks really look like. Again, a lot of that cracking is a result of the existing condition of the pavement at the time of treatment. We can see there on the left, it didn't matter what type of treatment we had. We had either a cape seal or a chip seal. And if you can't see very well where the crack goes, I'll help you a little bit, but you can see it there along the wheel paths, no matter where we, which treatment we had, it reflected back. Same thing, that's on US 280 in our southern sections. And then for the northern sections, it's basically the same thing with the thermal cracks. And for example, in this case, we had the old shoulder that was kept in place, and we had a thermal crack or a transverse crack going there. And eventually that made its way also through the new thin overlay. So again, there's cracking, but it's we need to look at the types of cracks and not just the amount of them. For IRI, for the most part, I think we're doing well. It's not much of an issue for the southern sections. It's more of an issue for the northern climate. And we even have some sections in CASA 8 where IRI has reached the poor condition threshold more than 170 inches per mile. And a lot of them in the fair condition category. Uh, it's not the same case for the US 169. I think just the difference in the construction and the pavement structure that's there, um, it's making all the difference. And 70th Street, even though it's recent, we have a percentage there, about a quarter of them that are already transitioning to the fair condition category. Why is that? Well, these are the types of cracks that we see. This was taken in CASA 8, so you can see the difference in elevation, the effect that that could have in the IRI. So it's no surprise that we see those numbers where we see them. And what's important is to see that pavement preservation treatments can help mitigate some of what's happening there. Now, rutting is not really an issue for any of the sections. Some of them just barely over the threshold for the fair condition category, so they may be 5, 6, 7 millimeters of rutting, but really not an issue for the most part, and that's not surprising, I think. I try to look for pictures where we will see something, and it was hard to find anything, so this is probably the best example that I can show. You can see just a little bit of a shadow there on the wheel path, but nothing that will make us be worried at this point. So it seems like our um, dominant indicators will be either cracking or IRI, depending on where the sections are. One thing that I wanted to talk about today is our efforts to put this data in a way that it's more accessible and easier for people to use. I showed a preview during the test track conference, something that we were working on to make it a little more interactive. The way it was set up is that you could go down the list and click on the different treatments, and then that takes you to a PDF file. You want to see another one, you got to get out and look at another one, and so on. So we try to make it more user-friendly. If you go to our webpage, ncat.us, and you'll see there's a tab there for pavement preservation. So that's where we keep all of our information, any resources, any references that you may want to find in there. We've added this observed performance, and right now we have it there just for Lee Road 159, but we keep working on it to include all the locations. But if you click on that, and before we go there, I need to make a really strong point here that these results are preliminary. They may be changing as we get the data, we are adjusting. So don't take this as being written in stone or anything like that. But moving on, you will find something like this. So it's basically a summary, same type of information that we had before, just easier to use. Just to give you an idea, and I could have done this with the with the live page. This is live right now, but I wanted to go one by one. These boxes here at the top left is just filters that you can use. So you just choose the treatment that you want to look at, what kind of initial condition you want to look at, and then the time frame. We've extended our analyses for cracking up to 10 years. So those curves that you see there for cracking, we fitted that using the data and extrapolated to 10 years just to have a nice round number. So you can choose those just to look at what you're really interested in. Otherwise, you just get the whole cloud of data. These numbers here at the top, if you look at the time to pour, that's just the time that it took to get to the 20% threshold that will put you in the poor condition category. So in this case, this is the control curve. We can see there 4.5 years until we reach that threshold. And then the time to pour for the treatment, in this case, we didn't get there in the 10-year period, so it's not showing anything. This crack reduction average right now, because we haven't selected a specific time, is just showing an average of each of these years. It's about a 20% crack reduction through the 10 years. But if you wanted to see what the crack reduction was specifically in year 9, then you will go back to that time filter and select the time that you want to look at. The other charts that you see there, the IRI and rutting charts, just show you the pre-construction, post-construction, and current numbers for all of those, and it's color coded, so you can see if it's green, still in the good condition category. If it's yellow, it has transition to fair condition category. Because we don't see a lot of change in time, we just kept the bar plots in there rather than getting any curves, because it's almost like a horizontal curve. You can see there that it doesn't really change that much. And down at the bottom, we have the overall section performance, again, looking at the indicators from map 21. Sorry. So, for example, the IRI in this section is good, and cracking and rutting is in the fair condition category, so the overall condition will be fair condition category. And you can, I believe, scroll down here and move to the right and see the rest of the chart. But this is basically what's in there. You can go there right now, look it up, play with it some. If you have questions or suggestions or anything like that, we'll be happy to hear that. This product is for our sponsors and people to use and have as another tool, basically. And just an example here. So this is what you will see as far as the data. In this case, I selected a double layer microsurfacing that was in good condition to begin with. But this is really what that looks like in the field. So big difference, especially in cracking, which was reflected in those charts. This just gives you the picture of where we are right now, but it's nice to have the data to support all of that, not just the visual observations. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that we have written several journal conference papers. We have a report there. So if you go to the Pavement Preservation Group Study Resources at the bottom of that menu on the left, this is where you'll find all of the published resources and links to those papers if you want to read them, visit them. There's the reference for them. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about was how preservation is affecting IRI. We have done a lot of discussion on crack performance, and we really can do the same thing with any other indicator. So we've done an analysis for IRI, again, because it's very relevant to the northern sections. And this is part of an upcoming TRB paper that will be going out for the next meeting. So just wanted to show a preview here, but it's basically the same approach as what we have done for cracking. We've looked at the IRI deterioration rates of treated versus untreated pavements and compared that, the time that it takes for them to reach a certain threshold, and do basically the same type of comparison and analysis that we have done in the past for cracking for the treatments. So how we did this, we basically took the control sections, first of all, looked at where those control sections were at the beginning of the study, and divided them by condition category and developed a curve for those sections so we could get the slope, basically deterioration rate, based on that pretreatment condition. So this is an example here for the CASA 8 sections. We had sections in good and fair condition category. We didn't have anything in poor condition category at the beginning of the study. And it doesn't change too much, but the slope is slightly higher for the sections that were in fair condition category prior to the beginning of the study. Then we did the same thing for the treated section. So we took each of the treatments, in this case the thin overlays, and we calculated the slope. We fitted the curve. It's an exponential form. We calculated the slope for all of them. You can see there's a pretty decent fit for most of them. High R square, over 80 for most of them. There's only one that's about 0.6. But we took those, and now the next step is to compare the two. One thing that we had to do was shift the untreated curve. We know the slope is basically the same, but we had to change the starting point at time 0 so that it will match the pre-treatment IRI of the treated section. So in this case, for example, this section was treated with a virgin thin overlay. Before that, the IRI was around 86 or something like that. So that's where the untreated curve starts. And then we just plot both of them. So you can see there, the dashed green curve is what would have happened if we had done nothing. And then the bottom solid curve is the actual performance of that section with preservation. So definitely a big difference that it made. And this is in CASA 8. So even though we had those aggressive thermal cracks, we've been able to keep a fairly decent performance by applying a pavement preservation treatment, which we wouldn't have if we hadn't done anything. So the next step will be to estimate the time that it takes for those sections to reach the poor condition category, which in this case is 170 inches per mile. The life extending benefit is the difference between the 2 points for treated or untreated. And in this case, I'm showing here again, CASA 8 sections. We can see that on average for all the treatments that will fall under the thin overlay category, we're adding about 5.4 years of life extension in terms of IRI, and standard deviation 1.7. We can see in general we get a little more if we're doing a combination. So if we're placing the thin overlay on top of a chip seal, or a variation of a chip seal, could be the regular chip seal or fiber mat or scrub seal, we tend to get a little bit more out of it. But in general, we're adding a good amount of time to these sections in terms of roughness. So that's important. We see that consistently, and that can give us a better idea of how to plan for the future, how to put this in our payment management system, and make better decisions as to what treatments to use. Now, getting to that poor threshold, we had to extrapolate far into the future. So right now we're at 5 years of service. For some of these sections, maybe that meant going all the way to year 10 or 11. So there's some uncertainty there. As we get more data, we can refine those numbers. For US 169, for example, we couldn't get a good prediction, didn't feel confident predicting into the future. If you can see there that example of the virgin thin overlay on US 169, the treatment is almost a horizontal line. So it would just take too long to get to that threshold. But I don't expect that trend to hold forever. We'll probably keep getting more data and more deterioration, and at some point it will accelerate. So I feel like we need to be cautious also when we look at that. But I think what's important here is to see the difference that it makes to have a treated pavement versus no preservation, and how effective it can be, and how much it can help us improve the condition of the pavement. It's also important to note, for example, the performance jump that will be the immediate improvement that we observed in terms of IRI. It was higher for sections that were rougher to begin with, and that makes sense because if they had higher IRI, that means there's more room for improvement by doing some treatment. If the section's already good, there's not much farther to go there. So that does make sense. And it was also dependent on the milling machine that we used. In the case of Minnesota, we had a full width milling machine and an 8-foot wide milling machine. So we were seeing that consistently better improvement when we used the full width machine. Um, so something to note there. Also, we see that the life extending benefit is higher for sections with lower pretreatment IRI. So it's also the importance of how this plays into treatment selection and timing of when we do the treatments. So there's more immediate improvement if you have a rougher pavement, but it may not give you as much life extending benefit. So you have to target the pavement just right so you get the better benefit out of it. This is again very rough right now, but it does give us a pretty decent idea where that trend is going. If your pavement is too rough, you do get some benefit. You do get some life extension, but it may not be as much as if you do your treatment a little earlier in the life when you're starting to see the deterioration, but you're not to the point where it's almost in that poor condition threshold. And again, to put this into images, I think it speaks a lot when we see them side by side. We have a section here, a couple of sections on CASA 8. The one that's closer to us will be the untreated section. So it's just a control section. You can see the thermal cracks in there. So not only is it cracked, it's also deteriorated around those cracks, a lot of spalling and breaking, and that's definitely affecting ride quality right there. The other section in the far side of the screen that had a thin overlay placed over a chip seal. So we do see the thermal crack also. It's very hard to stop that, but the way or the condition of that crack is definitely different from the do nothing scenario. So again, helps a lot and important to keep that in mind. So to wrap up here, I feel like treatments continue to be effective. If our threshold is the poor condition categories, then we have a lot of sections that are still far from that target. So we have a lot to learn coming up. And then it's evident that we have benefits, and as we keep collecting the data and analyzing, it's being easier for us to quantify those benefits based on the relevant parameter, be it cracking or IRI or anything else that we would like to look at. So this is where we are right now. We keep working, analyzing, collecting. That's basically our cycle. And I think that's all I have for now. And I can turn it over to Jerry or take any questions. I don't know how you want to handle this.
Why don't we see if we have any questions out there? If you have a question, please unmute your phone or type into the chat box. Jerry, you can get your presentation up and running while we do this. All right, we have about 73 people on the call now, which is great. Again, last call for questions as Jerry gets his presentation up. Presentation mode. Okay, we got one hand up from Colin. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, in the case of IRIs, that initial IRI, is there something we can do, say about, typical roadways that we would be doing, say a chip seal on say after 10, 12 years. And this would be something between a primary and a secondary road. So is this something we should be doing, do a fine milling, getting the tops off so that we can get a better IRI, or doing something like microsurfacing on top of it to get a better IRI so the chip seals would, and the road would last longer?
Thanks, Colin.
I think from what we've seen, definitely getting better performance. So if IRI is your concern, I would think so. It's good practice.
In Minnesota, we've done some micro milling projects with different surface treatments. We've got a report that should be available somewhere, I think, on the bituminous or the pavement preservation webpage. And that does make a nice improvement. So if we micro mill before any type of surface treatment, we've gotten some pretty good initial IRI numbers and longer life extension out of those projects.
There any other questions out there?
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Colin. No other questions, Jerry. Here's one question here. Do you guys tracking the friction characteristics as well?
We do. We have, at least here in the South, is monthly friction measurements. We don't really see much of a change. So nothing there that will give us an indication that there's any concern or any deterioration in terms of friction. But again, we keep looking at it closely because definitely it's a safety issue.
And that's the lock wheel trailer you're using, and we're doing the same up north here, but we're doing it once a year. We're again not seeing any real big changes. All right, Jerry, why don't you go ahead with your presentation, and we got till 10:05 until Jacob starts up.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Hi, my name's Jerry Geib. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Preservation Group meeting, and especially all our first-time attendees. And I'm going to talk about the Northern Preservation sections. So a quick summary of the MnDOT site. We've got some online data sources. I'm really excited about the work NCAT's doing also on Adriana showed her new tables. So I've got some to show from Minnesota. Quick summary on the freeze thaw challenge and what really impacts, I think, pavement performance in Minnesota. Update of the data and a few general observations. So especially for the new members, this is a transportation pooled fund. There's our number. This costs $50,000 per year. And also to point out that we are the NCAT Min-Road partnership. The preservation work is really not on our test tracks, but off-site. So here in Minnesota, our office I'm in here down at Maplewood, Minnesota in the Twin Cities, Min-Road's about 45 minutes away, and our test section up in Pease, Minnesota is about 45 minutes up here from Min-Road. Just a general layout here. This is US 169, which is our high volume route. CASA 8 right there. So County State 8, Highway 8 is the low volume section, 2.5 miles long there. So we were fortunate to get, I think, two different and interesting test sections in one spot. And not really to read because it's pretty small font, but more the general layout on 169. Our sections are in the northbound, driving lane. Here, most of the surface treatments are at the start. We get into some controls, some fog seals, and then our thin overlays at the northern end of the section on the County State 8 Highway. Similar layout of the test sections. What worked out well here down at the east end is that wherever we did a thin lay, so we did these milling and thin lace surfaces, we really have a control across on the other side. So it was easy to observe the thermal cracking or reflective cracking performance there. So on the MnDOT pavement preservation website, we've got history and test section information. That's the north-south, and now the 70th Street Recycling Project, which is really turning out interesting. Got some field reviews. One of our staff here has done a lot of work on annual visual distress maps, so that information is available. I think we've got the link to the NCAP papers Adriana mentioned, and then our construction application data. So as you look at cells, if you want to know any application rate, that information is also posted online. The other thing we've recently done, and for the first time this spring, our aeronautics unit was out, and they did a flyby of all the cells. I'm going to show you a quick demo of that, but it is on the NRRA YouTube channel. Got a link here. They're going to do this once a year, so they took these pictures we're going to look at in May of this year. Each cell's about two minutes, just a little over 2 minutes, and you can use the map I showed you just a few slides earlier. Will tell you what the different sections are. I think in the future we'll get these labeled with a little more detail in our first run through here. So this cell says some people use trunk highway, like US Highway 169, and that's just the third cell. So this is a single single chip seal. I'll pop it open. I'm starting sort of toward the end of this one. When you look at 2 minutes, it seems to go by a lot, fairly slow, but you can see that along the center line in between the wheel paths, the snow plows have done, we've scraped off a lot. It's happened at the very edge. The work we laid out was inside of the wheel paths or inside the striping. And we also did this spring, the maintenance forces put down some mastic material here. Now we're on to the double chip seal. You can see we've had a lot less snowplow damage, especially on in between the wheel paths. In the wheel paths, you do see a little, I don't think I'd call it bleeding or flushing, but it's a little richer in there. It hasn't impacted our friction numbers yet. You can see how we've got some of the bigger thermal cracks here that come off the shoulder into our lane there. So this is the double chip seal, and these are available for every cell that we've had on here. I think if you start this at the first cell, you can continue to go through the first 15, but then you'd have to search and look at all the other cells. So that's one of the newer features we have going, and I think it's really good to have that visual of what the performance looks like. Next, a quick kind of cold weather synopsis, and this one was from January of 2 winters ago, so we'll see what we get this winter. But we hit minus 54 degrees in Cotton, Minnesota, on what I like to call a chilly night. And what that can really do, and this is data from the first cycle of Minroad. It's opened in 94 to traffic. We had very little thermal cracking. Here's 100 linear feet. These are different cells. So not a lot of cracking going on. Second year, not much cracking. But on February 2nd at Minroad, it was, let's call it minus 40. I like to round off a little. Minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. These were all binders that, this was built pre-super pave, but going back after the super pave system got rolling, we graded the binders, and we had 58 minus 28, 58 minus 22 in the Celsius system, you know, minus 28, that's about a minus 19-ish, minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. We're at minus 40. We cracked all our pavements really in a single event there, and that's really the big challenge we have with the, you know, preserving pavements in Minnesota, is when we get the thermal cracks, how to maintain them and keep that small area from freezing. The other big challenge, and this is a freeze-thaw profile here, we're up in kind of northern third of Minnesota, January or this spring of this year, and you can see in the blue line here as the frost depth goes in, and we got down to 6 feet of frost depth, and then we thaw in the spring. Our big challenge here is this first 2 weeks of thawing, our ag base has frozen material underneath it, so that water is trapped in there. The ag base modulus values get really weak. The hot mix is still pretty stiff. It's still very cold on the surface, but we've got this thawing going on underneath, and until we completely thaw out and the water can drain out of the system, this pavement's really in its probably weakest state for at least two weeks of the year. And then also we've got some clay underneath here, which we know doesn't drain very well. So winter is really tough on these pavements. And then to get into some of the study and the benefits of here, I really like what I enjoy about working on this project for the last really 5 years since our partnership and construction in 2016 of our northern sections, to improve and or extend the pavement life and really do it in a cost-effective manner. The information we're really getting some great data on, and after 9 years in the south and 5 years in the northern area, is this improvement life extension. Cost effectiveness is going to be a little more dependent on every agency's different costs, and then to kind of compare those costs against different treatments and determine what can be cost effective for your agency. Pre-treatment condition on 169. There wasn't as much thermal cracks. We saw a couple in the video fly over. This pavement had more little block cracking. You can see it in here. There's kind of a thermal crack, but not very well defined. In a core taken out a couple feet away from that crack that came out in pretty good condition. So we had some good pavement structure there. And Adriana mentioned in one of her slides, we treated some of our control sections, and I'm a big IRI guy, but it showed this really highlights to me that we really got to look at every pavement section a little different. You can see that at the time we treated it, and was putting microsurfacing on this control, the ride was just at the good to fair level, so the ride was still reasonable. Rutting really wasn't never a problem, but what you can see is that the cracking was really going up, percent cracking. So percent cracking was really controlling what the district operations people saw in determining that, you know, it's really time to treat this pavement, and we'd like to get out there, and that's why we put the microsurfacing on it. So now to get in a summary of some of the treatments. So microsurfacing on 169, you can see when we started, all the sections were in the 70 to 80 inches. After a good treatment, we improved the ride, and here is every winter. From fall to winter, we always go up in roughness, and then hopefully, now it's bouncing around a lot there, but what I see is from fall to winter, roughness increasing, and you can see here at the end, from spring to fall, pavements kind of settle down, and we're typically getting smoother. So now we're in the about 70 to high 80s here, so not a big increase in ride on these sections. Chip seals, not all of them had initial improvement in ride. My experience with chip seals is not big ride improvements. It's going to always depend on the pavement, but here the life extending benefit can be the big improvement, the big cost effectiveness. Rides from 70 to mid 80s, now mid 80s to 105. So really the first chip seals moving into the fair condition. And once again, to some degree, getting much rougher during the winter and smoother from spring to fall. Thinly, Adriana mentioned the two different milling machines. So on 169, where we did 6 treatments, we're done with the full width milling machine. We got outstanding initial ride. Numbers 30 inches per mile are just fantastic. Really anything under 60 is very good. So these pavements were in, very good, good condition. And I'd even say, most DOTs are probably not looking to do a thin mill and fill at this IRI pavement or IRI number, but you can see we got outstanding results. And even today, we're still 5 years later in the 40s and one still in the 30. That's just fantastic performance, which then turns into cost-effective life extension. Crack seal treatments, 169, I think our first section here is had quite a big jump in roughness. Everything did improve, but there's our crack seal numbers. And some of these were covered with, let's see, I think 2, we have crack seal under the chip seal here. And here's microsurfacing on top of the crack sealing, which is the smoothest of these 3 crack treated sections. And for the pre-treatment condition on the county road, not the kind of squirrely cracking we had on US 169, but every section 1/10 of a mile here had 5 to 7, I'd call them classic thermal cracks, where the pavement was cracked across the lane. And that was really the challenge with treating these sections, is maintaining the thermal cracks, microsurfacing, and some of them, especially the rougher ones, microsurfacing can tend to flow into those thermal cracks a little better. You can see the double micro, a green line, made a really nice improvement. So 2 passes filling in those transverse thermal cracks, and then just continuing to get a little rougher. We've still got a couple that haven't changed much. But once again, every pavement, every surface is a little different, so performance always varies and depends on the individual section. Chip seal sections, similar story, getting rough in the winter, smoother in the summer. We've gone from actually really one fairly rough section, which is about back to its precondition IRI values, to now all of the chip seal treatments are in the fair IRI condition over here. Thin lay treatments, and once again we use the 2 different milling machines, but these 2 best performers here are were the full lane, full width machine that got us outstanding IRI under 40. Not sure what happened here on this. I'm guessing there was some dirt or something that we had on the pavement here that spiked up this one ride number here, but so I kind of consider that an outlier, and these IRI performance is still pretty good. This one's jumping up a little bit here. And crack seal treatment, so the thermal cracks, 5 to 7 good thermal cracks on the county road. And I think mastic type treatment was really a good solution for that pavement. You can see we all made a nice initial performance, but big thermal cracks like that tend to move a lot. Adriana showed you the picture with the big, about a 1-inch drop at that crack. And so that pavement is definitely a frost movement in the winter. Here's a couple of the recent pictures. So single chip seal shot at 3400ths of a gallon per square yard. We had this single chip had the most snowplow damage. You can see that we scraped the chip seal kind of off that longitudinal shoulder joint. So because of we had a rumble stripe here where you ground the rumble strip and then paint it to become a rumble stripe. So I think as part of that, they moved the shoulder travel lane joint inside into the travel lane, and we get that deterioration there. So they did the district maintenance forces did the maintenance on that, which shouldn't be impacting our ride quality or our ride IRI numbers because we'd be over here in the wheel path. But you can see that the chip seal with fiber mat, we did shoot it a little heavier, so we have two variables. We have a higher shot rate of emulsions and the fibers in there, and we certainly maintained the condition of that chip seal much better than the single. Here's the triple chip seal, both low volume and high volume. I think from protecting a pavement standpoint, we have about a gallon per square yard of emulsion down on these. The triple chip on the high volume got a little more flushing, bleeding going on. The triple chip on the low volume, except for the thermal crack problems, which are once again really tough to treat. But I think that triple chip seal on the low volume pavement is going to last a very long time. Another observation, the Cape seal seems to be very tough. We've only done a couple on the Minnesota state highway. I can think of, we've got some test sections out there. But sometimes when our chip seals seem to get a little plow damage, and I've seen microsurfacing wear down to the underlaying pavement surface, the hot mix that was there. But when you do a Cape and combine the chip seal followed by the microsurfacing, you really get a tough surface that if you can tend to wear off the microsurfacing, it seems to, when it gets to the top of the chip, you just, the wearing stops and you get a long lasting surface treatment. And from the early findings down at NCAT and things that we're seeing now, that any crack fill prior to surface treatment, I think is going to certainly extend, provide longer life extending benefits and better performance on those pavements. Our control sections are really starting to fail now, a little more than any of the treated sections. Roughness, I mentioned a few times, increasing from fall to spring and improving spring to fall. And for the county system, it's really those well-defined transverse thermal cracks, which I think are going to impact performance and ride. And on our US highway, some surface cracking issue. I'd like to thank all our sponsors, and that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'll see if I can stop sharing here and be happy to answer your questions.
All right, well, thank you, Jerry. I know Jacob put a comment in there that one increase in IRI there was actually when it was right next to someone that's mowing their lawn, the grass clippings all over the road. So something like that affects the monitoring vans that we use. We had a comment on micromilling. I think it was answered by David, and
okay,
talked about the minimum teeth, and then he included picture there below in the chat. Is there any other questions, or David, did you want to follow up on that at all? We got a couple minutes here until we move on to Jacob. And we'll go with that. If no other questions, we'll move on to Jacob. Again, I remind everyone to mute your line when you're not speaking and to reduce bandwidth a little bit, maybe reduce your images. I know we got one image there that's showing that maybe that could be reduced, but I think quality so far has been really good so far on this call. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jacob Calvert. He is our new Minroad monitoring engineer. He's been working with Minroad for a couple of years now, but just got his PE and got a promotion. So congratulations, Jacob, on that. I'd also like to thank Jacob for his work on the videos that he's been working with our aeronautics on collecting those. We'll be doing that twice a year at Minroad, once a year on other offsite sites like 169, Kasai 8. And that's been great to have. So with that, Jacob, would you like to follow up on 70th Street performance update?
Yeah, are you seeing my screen?
It looks great.
Wonderful. All right, good morning. This is Jacob Calvert with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'd like to welcome you to this field performance update of the 70th Street pavement preservation test sections. These are the northern recycled cells. This morning, I will be giving a quick reminder of the overall test section layout and geometry. I'll touch briefly on the construction of the test sections, as more in-depth construction details can be seen in some of the previous presentations. I will then go over the most recent performance data collected this season. I will mention the structural coefficient work that Adriana and Tauhid are calculating at NCAT. I'll give an overall summary of what I've presented and follow with a teaser for the MnDOT aeronautics work at Minroad, which it looks like Jerry has beaten me to the punch on that. But we'll continue to cover that again, and time will be left at the end to answer any questions that you might have. As well as being a collaboration between Minroad and NCAT, these sections are also a collaboration between Minroad and the cities of Otsego and Albertville. The north half of westbound 70th Street is owned by Otsego, while the south side, the eastbound lane, belongs to Albertville. There's Otsego's water tower and the Albertville malls for context. Commercial traffic consisted mostly of deliveries to the local Knife River plant, as well as the Trudell Trailers, which is located right next to the concrete plant. And the majority of the residential traffic came from the developments on the northeast side. 70th Street also serves as a side road to connect Albertville and the nearby city of Monticello. Most of the visitors to Minroad will have traveled across 70th Street and may remember its previous condition. I've been told it's hard to forget. There we go. And one thing we did not anticipate through this the last couple of years is the amount of construction traffic that would increase with the expansion of the housing development to the north, the addition of a Michaels facility next to Knife River, and the beginning of another large project to the south of 70th Street that we're not certain what that will be yet. 70th Street was due for repairs with deteriorating road surfaces and low ride quality. Michael Vertis likes to joke about how the cracks could be seen from space, and the ride quality was so poor, he was afraid our inspection van would fall apart when we had to run high-speed data collections. These factors, along with its scheduled replacement within the next 5 years, made it an excellent candidate for inclusion in the road preservation study. And here I've highlighted some of the IRI numbers pre-treatment. And you may have noticed from that how the condition of the south side of the road varied from the north side. Albertville had only a few residents on the south side and had a lower concern about the condition of the road than the more populated north side. This can be seen in the visual distress of the roadway and is reflected in the measured roughness index. You can see where more treatments had been applied to the north side and the south side had kind of been left to do its own thing. It was therefore determined that the deeper treatments should be placed on the south side eastbound lane to get the most benefit. So this portion of the pavement preservation recycling study consisted of 500-foot treatment sections that were constructed on the same road. 50-foot transitions were added between cells. We're going ahead. Sorry about that. 50-foot transition sections were added between cells and room was left for lead-in length for the inspection van. The main treatments consisted of a 1-inch thin lay over 7 inches of full depth reclamation, where stabilization was performed by foam and emulsion methods. 1-inch thin lay over 3-inch cold in place recycling, again using both foam and emulsion. 1-inch thin lay over 3 inches of cold central plant recycling, again using both foam and emulsion. The control for these sections consisted of 1-inch thin lay over the existing pavement, with further controls being added with a 1-inch thin lay over a deeper 2-inch and 3-inch mill and overlay. Sorry, my slides are getting ahead of me. Buzz and Adriana led the from NCAT led construction efforts with a crew from East Alabama Paving traveling from Alabama for construction efforts, and Wirtgen demo team providing a CCPR plant and recycling equipment. And just to note, though the cell numbers are primarily used by Minroad, it should be noted that these numbers have been changed from 7,000 east and west to the numbering format seen here. We'll try and refer to these test sections by their treatment names, but cell numbers may be used out of habit. And here we can see the different treatment depths compared to the existing roadway on the left side of the graph. The existing roadway consisted of 4 inches of HMA over a 6-inch granular base over a clay subgrade. To this, we had 2 deeper treatments of the 7-inch of stabilized full depth reclamation, and then our 3-inch treatments of CIR, CCPR, and overlay. Westbound received 1 3-inch CCPR treatment and a 2-inch overlay. All of the sections received the same 1-inch thin lay of high quality asphalt designed by NCAT. This thin lay control is not the normal treatment for roadways in this condition, but it was decided to be used as the minimum treatment to get these sections through the next couple of years. So it was planned for short term. We said this is the shortest we can kind of get it through with the least amount of effort. And during construction, material was sampled during placement, and Ben Bauer was able to create cores in NCAT's on-site trailer. These photos show cores from the different treatments and are displayed here to show the visual differences in the mixes and to note the different designs that were provided. Actual mix designs are discussed in previous presentations. And I've included this slide mainly because Michael really likes it, and I hope you agree. I think it's fun to see all of the material differences. But if you do have questions, Michael and Adriana are available afterwards for any mixed design questions. All right, over the last year, manual distress surveys have been performed in October, January, and August. Cracking lengths were collected manually at these times. And as discussed previously, reflective cracking appears to be the main form of distress. What's new this year is that transverse cracks have now appeared in all sections, with the control sections still showing the most cracking. Rutting still appears to be low, and so has only been measured by our high-speed automated pavement distress inspection van. And as Adriana mentioned in the previous presentation, no repairs were required this year. And as expected with cold weather asphalt, transverse cracking has been noted in all of the test sections. The majority of the cracking can be seen as reflective cracking in the thin lay control sections, shown here in the middle of the graph. Most of the treatments still show low amounts of transverse cracking, with the stabilized full depth reclamation section continuing to be the exception. This was not what was expected with the deeper 7-inch treatments, so we will continue to keep an eye on it as we continue our collections. Longitudinal cracking lengths show similar trends, with the thin lay controls showing the bulk of the cracking. Stabilized sections show minimal cracking, and the rest of the treated sections have yet to display longitudinal cracks. Ride data collected from our high-speed automated pavement distress inspection van showed similar results for all sections. Here you can see the total average of the last 3 collections. The general trends appears to show the right wheel path having larger ride measurements. One of the factors that may be contributing to these higher wheel path measurements was the test construction method, previously touched on by Adriana. The test sections were constructed full lane width, but the shoulders were left in place. These existing shoulders may not have provided ample containment force during construction, and the existing distresses may be serving as propagation points for the reintroduction of distress into the new treatments. This graphic shows the average IRI of both wheel paths over the length of our data collection and illustrates the general trend of ride measurements. What previously had been a slight difference in the thin lay controls and the recycled sections has blended into a more homogeneous grouping. The main standouts are the 2-inch and 3-inch overlay control sections seen at the bottom, shown here in the dark green, which have shown from the very beginning the improvement in ride that can be obtained from a double overlay, where the construction crew had 2 chances to really improve the ride. The other standouts include the thin lay control sections consistently at the top. These, for one reason or another, were rougher sections from the start and have continued to be so. However, all sections appear to have a similarly gradual slope, meaning nothing appears to be deteriorating more rapidly than others. As with the ride measurements, rutting is consistently higher in the right wheel path, but all sections continue to show low rutting. And this can be more clearly seen for context with the pre-construction measurements shown included in these graphs as a way of re-illustrating the point that the measurements remain low. Ride is in the good to fair condition. Rutting was not previously a previous concern with this roadway, and with the pre-treatment measurements likely being slightly elevated due to more to distress in the road and potholes than any noticeable rutting issues. For both ride and rutting, the general trends seem to indicate that the road will not be returning to its pre-treatment condition before any planned reconstruction. Everything seems to be going well, and we don't believe that there are any problems headed this way. Now on to the work that Adriana and Tauhid are doing at NCAT. In an attempt to give engineers more practically usable data sets, they are determining layer coefficients for each of the different treatments. These layer coefficients could be used by future engineers to determine prescribed treatment thicknesses. For this effort, falling weight deflectometer data has been collected from 4 points in each section. This data was used to back calculate layer moduli for the asphalt and base layers. These moduli were used to establish a structural number for the pavement. That structural number was then used along with the layer thicknesses and cracking data to develop layer coefficients for the overlay control sections and then for the treatment sections. This process is iterative with the seed values being calculated, used, and recalculated. As Adriana had mentioned previously, these results are not final, with at least one more iteration planned to tighten up these standard deviations. Currently, most treatments structures compare favorably to the conventional 2-inch and 3-inch overlay. So I've shown a straight line for the seed values that were calculated for the 2-inch and 3-inch overlay that were used to then calculate these structural coefficients. But as I said, they are working on these and results may be slightly modified in the future. All right, so takeaways. With a good mix design and a good paving crew, even just a 1-inch thin overlay or thin lay can make a large difference in the performance of a road. As you can see from this photo here, the road has made a huge performance leap between being scary to ride on to what looks like a really nice road. Overall, in spite of increased construction traffic, the treatments are performing well and continue to show a vast improvement over the pre-treated roadway. Currently, there are no concerns or indications that the condition of the road will degrade or pre-treatment levels, and we look forward to several more years of data collection. Dr. Vargas and her research team will continue to analyze the data and will continue to find more beneficial ways of presenting the data to future engineers and end users. You should be seeing more of their work being published in the near future. And if you would like to see these test sections for yourself, you can just enter Minroad 70th into the YouTube search bar and you will find drone videos provided to us by our MnDOT's aeronautics team. This is a new collaboration for us, and the aeronautics team has agreed to fly over all of our test sections on a yearly basis. So you can see test sections also for 169, CASA 8, I-94, and our low volume road. The easiest way to do it is just to go to YouTube, enter Minroad 70th in the search bar, and it will bring up Albertville 70th Street slides. And coincidentally, Google Earth has also been documenting the progress of 70th Street with photos taken each of the last 3 years. All you have to do is find 70th Street and move the slider that changes their collection dates. And it's a fun way to follow the progress of the road as well as the surrounding construction projects. And this is where you can see the cracks that can be seen from space. You can also see some of the reflection cracks coming back through. I would like to acknowledge the work that has gone into this study, especially the work of Dr. Adriana Vargas and Dr. Buzz Powell at NCAT, who have led the research and development of this study. I would like to thank Work and Demo Team and East Alabama Paving for giving us such nice roads to work with, Ingevity for their design work, and Caterpillar and Road Tech for their use of equipment. There are many more that I don't have time to mention, but I've tried to include in the summary on the right. And of course, I would like to thank our sponsors for your continued interest and support. Now we can take questions if we've got time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Very nice. Again, City of Albertville and Otsego got a good deal when they let us use this road for research. It's really improved a lot. And it's a great poster child when it comes to what these types of treatments can do for this type of roadway. Do we have any questions out there? I don't see any in the chat right now. quiet group of 80 people. So, all right. Thank you, Jacob. Nice job, and appreciate the effort. All right, now I will share my screen and kind of do the summary for the final. I want to talk about kind of the future and the direction that we're going to take, wanting to take this, and some ideas on how we could do that. So with that, are you seeing my screen, everyone? Just to make sure. Someone
Yeah, we
give me
see
a
it.
yes. All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
And I'll be talking about the preservation group. So again, there's a number of efforts that we're doing with NCAT. The preservation, again, is the one we're talking about today. I will talk about the cracking group experiment tomorrow at our next 2-hour seminar that we're having tomorrow at 9 o'clock to 11. If you didn't receive an email, let me know and I'll get that to you. But then we'll be talking about the additive group experiment also tomorrow, and kind of the future in that direction and how that combines with the reflective cracking challenge from NRA and other efforts in Missouri, and how that's all tying together. So we'll get into that tomorrow. But again, talking to preservation group, this pooled fund originally started with NCAT and Alabama DOT, and now MnDOT is the lead state. Again, the original phase that we built test sections, both the north and the south. Most of the funding went towards the salaries, traffic control, and construction, and developing kind of that initial process that Adriana has gone through on how to process and kind of show the data that was being collected. Now that we've entered into phase 2, we'll be extending this for 18 months to 2024, which is great because we'll be able to see a few more data points and how that pulls together for both 70th Street we built through this second phase. Again, salaries, traffic control, and we're doing analysis for both the northern and southern test sections. When you go to the pooled fund website, you can see kind of the different information on there related to that. So we'll be going for 5 years, which is the full length of pooled fund can go. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we want to go past that point. And again, historic wise, 159 was built, we developed that, NCAT developed that. They approached us here in Minnesota about developing this partnership, which you've seen the fruits of that efforts. Bringing us into it, we were able to build 280 down south. Then in 2016 and 2019, we built others test sections with CASA 8 and 169 in 2016 and then 2019. And we're kind of seeing all these sections going pretty well up till 2022. We're going to start seeing 169 probably need some rehab, I think, in the non-thin lay sections, but we'll be talking about that. But again, the effort is the first pooled fund, second pooled fund, and then what to do in this 18-month extension will be our discussion area. Again, if you, Greg, if you could mute your phone, that would be great. Thank you. So with the current contract tasks that we have for phase 2 here, second pooled fund, we're doing a great job, I think, in the data collection, consistency both north and south. We've updated our website. We've done different things. We've done performance summaries. The things that kind of killed this efforts right now is with COVID and everything, the peer exchange we were planning in 2020 has been tough to do. That's kind of left undone in task 4. We've been doing mid-year project reports, working on that. And, sponsor meetings we've held every 6 months. But the task 7 is something that we need to work on in task 8 going into the future, is how to kind of bring everything together for our customers' needs and wants to make a difference, put it that way. So looking at the states and what they've committed, this means the money that they've promised to the pooled fund Again, right there, you can see the states that are participating right now, and along with Federal Highway and the Foundation for Pavement Preservation, they've been in for 5 years. Federal Highway's in for 4. But again, this is we've been always kind of saying this is going to be a 5-year study, and we're looking for 5-year commitments. I know, like Wisconsin, in their defense, they only commit every year that they work. Most other states commit money kind of farther into the future. But I'll be sending out some information asking states what their intents are when it comes to what type of commitments they're going to make. And then we'll talk about the obligations and the funding in the next couple slides. But again, these are all in the quarterly reports these have been summarized. So again, this will be in the PowerPoint. It's also in the quarterly reports. It shows the 22 participants and the years they've committed money and the payments they've made or obligated. You can see right now that we're at about 4.4 million in commitments, 3.4 million in obligations. We're assuming that once money's been promised, they'll make those payments, and that's usually not a problem. You can see those highlighted areas there. And again, we're right on task with that for most of these things. So it's no big deal related to getting the money and things like that. But for planning purposes, these would be some of the questions that I'll be asking each of the individual states, and some emails that'll be coming up to kind of support the planning for the next 18 months. So when it comes down to it, like I said before, we have those commitments. And the things that we've done, you can see right here in years 1, 2, and 3, we've done different things with kind of funding to do the original contract with NCAT. We did NCAT helped with 70th Street and the recycling that Jacob just got done talking about. MnDOT's getting paid for salaries and expenses for data collection and supporting this effort. And we also have some expenses with traffic control, shipping, and things like that, along with MnDOT. So these are tied together. That's years 1, 2, and 3. And then for years 4 and 5, we're kind of looking at that extension that MnDOT will write a contract for. We'll have the same level of effort for these 18 months based on their current costs. Same thing with MnDOT coming into the future and our traffic control. But this kind of gets into the discussion and kind of a need later. I'll be asking, how do we make some decisions on what upcoming tasks maybe we could work at? Because if you look at the money that's been obligated in August of 2021, that's this 3.4 million. We're short. I mean, I always joke that it's pooled funds are like going to the bar. You put your money on the table, and some people, if they leave before you pay the check, you're in trouble. But that usually doesn't happen. We'll get that money because we expect to get the 4.4 million as expected, as shown here. So we could have, if no one else put money into the pooled fund, we would have 118,000 left over. If everyone paid for the full 5 years, we'd have 1.1 or 1.2, almost 2 million for this remaining 18 months. So the question is, do we ask all the states to contribute that? If we do, what are we going to do with those funds? And I'll get into some of that in a second here. So, the final push for this last 18 months, 2 years, it's 2 years from now, but it's 18 months NCAT's contract. We need to make modifications by next spring. Which is 18 months, we'll be talking about tasks for 4 and 7, kind of that peer exchange and the pooled fund implementation really gets into, how do we make a difference? What do we want to do? Some of the questions for the group would be what do we want the final product to look like? Related to implementation planning. What do you guys need to make a difference? Curves, tables, develop a tool app similar to what Adriana's been working on. Maybe it's just enough, like Jake was showing, that 70th Street is a great demo on how recycling is really beneficial compared to thin lace by themselves. A combination of treatments. But again, trigger levels, what's most important? You know, we've talked about cracking, we've talked about roughness, what other things there might be, life extending benefits, condition improved benefits. You know, how does this all play into the products that each of the states are looking for this pooled fund to provide? You know, which treatments might be the primary focuses, how to bring it to costs. You know, there's a lot of efforts of having, you know, maybe it's where states put in their own costs or there's set costs, kind of bring that into it to look for those benefits, you know. And then what is the next phase of this pooled fund? You know, things that we could do after 2024. Does should we do the third pooled fund or not, or what we want to do? And I guess I would think it makes sense to do that, but we need to have that discussion. So I guess what I'm kind of proposing and talking with NCAT, talking with FP Squared, talking with Foundation for Pavement Preservation, some discussions with them, but we need to get together probably, instead of just doing the sponsor meetings, to have a technical advisory panel developed for this effort. Kind of looking for those, you know, at least 10 states to get involved, to kind of bring in the expertise to focus on the implementation and what those final tasks will be for this pooled fund effort and what the future will be. We really need to try to utilize experts from others. So when we had those discussions with Pavement Preservation and the foundation, we talked about, you know, what their needs are and how that responds to industry. And we talked about some of the other efforts like NCHRP 4426 and how that could be support the efforts we're doing in this pooled fund and how we could support them. TRB has different committees that are working on the same sort of thing. How do we get them involved along with FHWA? So that's kind of the second thing is, you know, getting this expertise together to kind of form the future. I think we'll continue to do the national updates like we're doing today. But we do need to start trying to look at developing training and workshops. This could be something, maybe a 2024 TRB focus, workshops, different things like that. Targeted national working groups for implementation, local and national costs, that kind of gets into some of the work that the Foundation for Pavement Preservation and the different regional groups are working on related to cost, bringing that into it. Or should we use this additional funds, if we do have additional funds, for doing additional regional test decks? We could do stuff, you know, both in Minnesota and Alabama fairly easy, but we could also maybe do stuff in other regions around the country. You know, through the pooled fund, I don't think we'd pay for construction per se, but if a state was interested, we could provide technical assistance, different things through NCAT and MnDOT, on-site assistance, data collection, storage, analysis is a part of that. But, you know, there's some different avenues that we could go into. But again, I think that's where the technical advisory panel kind of help us, guide us in those directions. And then again, one is the interest in the pooled fund, number 3 in 2024. You know, we should start thinking about that because pooled funds don't just happen. They take a little time to develop and processes and paperwork to go through that. So with that, those are some of the different things that I'll be sending information out on to have that discussion and get that group put together so some of these decisions can be made and move forward to the future. Again, you know, things have been going good with the preservation. You can see the details there in the pooled fund website and different things that we're working with. Again, plug for National Road Research Alliance, the additive group study, and the consortium of the Capri that's being run by NCAT, kind of the asphalt version of the concrete efforts that are going on through that other pooled fund. So again, thank you for all your support over the time. I'll be contacting the states and different groups about that TAP membership. And I guess, do you have any questions or comments for myself or anyone else that presented today? The deafening roar of silence. So you can unmute yourself and talk now. We have a few minutes here. Adriana, anything else you would like to add after seeing the presentations or discussion?
I don't think I have much to add. Quiet crowd
Yeah.
we have today. Maybe just point out after going through Jacob's presentation, there's also an upcoming TRB paper on 70th Street. So be on the lookout for that. We've done some connection between lab performance and field performance, and we've had some interesting results. And we'll be talking more about that during the next TRB.
Jerry, any other follow-ups?
No, we'll just, continue to watch performance, and performance leads to the cost effectiveness determination. So.
Yep. How about you, Jacob? Any other final comments or things you'd like to add?
Yep, we'll hope to see more FWD data in the future. COVID slowed us down a little bit last year, but we'll keep plugging away on that. Yeah, and check out the drones.
Check out the drones in a positive way.
Yeah.
So with that, again, I'll be sending out an email talking about the funding and the number of years for each state. I'll use the pooled fund website contact based off that, because we do have a number of different contacts through each of the states. But I'll use the information that's on the pooled fund website. We'll look at membership for the TAPs, for that TAP that we discussed about, have a meeting in November, December to kind of get going on that. That can kind of help us form the extension for contract for NCAT and the efforts that we put forward into the future, and kind of discuss the phase 3 possibilities and what we want to do with that. So again, I'd like, just from all our presentations today, I'd like to thank you for your time and your efforts and your participation in this pooled fund. As always, let's see, got a question finally. There we go. Hey, do you see the question there? Okay,
I did.
you answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a question on how often we'll be updating the tool with the curves. Typically, it will be quarterly. We don't see a lot of change any sooner than that. So quarterly is about when we will be changing, and it's probably mostly those final numbers for the IRI and rutting. Cracking tends to not change the shape of that curve too much. So it may be updated, just doesn't look like any major changes.
Okay. I guess, of course, you get a question when I'm just about wrapping it up, but that's how it goes. But again, thanks for your time today and your participation. Again, this pooled fund's always open for people that are interested in participating. Again, pooled funds are kind of public domain anyways, so we encourage all conversations from all different groups with us. We really appreciate the participation though. And again, a little plug for tomorrow from 9 to 11, we'll be talking about the cracking group, additive group study focus, which will highlight some efforts related to the Northern Cracking Study final report from Michael Vertis, construction of the test track down at NCAT that's just being completed by Buzz Powell, and along with kind of the introduction to the additive group study with reflective cracking challenge that Randy West and Michael Vertis will be discussing. And we can join us tomorrow. Again, if you haven't gotten that email with the link, drop me a line and I'll share that link with you. But again, thanks again for your time today, and hope you have a good day the rest of the day. Thanks.